Hello and welcome back to the Aetheral space. Yeah, I
said the wrong series name. Yeah. Well, last
it's
time
because I'm always
Aetheral
thinking
Space,
about the viewers of my YouTube channel that I'm discovering SCP.
Okay. Well, last time on
Because
Aetheral Space,
my viewers, I love them. I said
it
it.
sounded really hard for you to say.
That's because of all the love.
It was just hard to get out of your throat.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, last time on Aetheral Space, can I finish the recap this time?
Okay.
Well, last time, Dragon was running away with Skipper, and Skipper's like breathing in poison, but he's pretending he's not. And then he met with the Widow, and he's like, "You turned me into a child soldier." She was like, "But I love you, Skipper." And he was like, "I never want to see you again, or I'll kill you." And I believe that's all that happened, pretty much.
Also, the fucking Daphne's up to no good.
Oh, wait, Pierrot. Yeah, Pierrot is... Sorry, yeah, Daphne's up to no good, and Pierrot is on the other ship.
Yeah.
The Supremacy one. Yeah, okay. Are we ready?
This
is a long one, guys, so it's... This is either the end of the arc or the climax. I'm gonna assume it's the climax. Because Tanhony doesn't end an arc this early. Not since arc 2.
It's almost over.
I'd like for you to... Wait, this is weird. Now you're fucking talking to the reader directly. I'd like for you to imagine 3 things. The first is a puzzle that has never been solved. It doesn't much matter what kind of puzzle you imagine it as, a jigsaw or a matter of numerology or perhaps some kind of video game, so long as you keep in mind that this is the most difficult puzzle to ever exist. Nobody has ever beaten it, and it is believed nobody ever will. The second thing you need to imagine is the person attempting to solve this puzzle. Let's call them the player, for ease of reference. The player is an ordinary person, like you or me, and he's not actually that adept at solving puzzles of this kind. That's fine, though. He can learn, and all experience is valuable. The player does absolutely nothing but sit in his room all day and attempt to solve the puzzle. He does not succeed, nor will he. Let's get this out of the way. The person has absolutely no chance of solving the puzzle. His only role is to be the first. He sits in this room for days upon days, months upon months, years upon years. He still does not solve the puzzle. One day he dies. It doesn't matter how he dies. Nothing matters except the puzzle. Once the first player dies, someone else enters and begins trying to solve the puzzle. This is the second player. And then that second player tries to solve that puzzle for the rest of his life, until he expires, and a third player enters, and a fourth, and a fifth, and so on. You might think, based on what I've told you, that the struggle of these players is futile. No matter how many people try it, the puzzle cannot be solved. It's meaningless, no matter how many people devote their lives to it. There's no accumulation of experience, no effort taken by a single player making things easier than the next. You only believe this because I haven't told you about the third thing you must imagine yet. Imagine there is another person in the room. I was just talking about the prince, watching while the players do their utmost to solve the puzzle. We'll call them the observer. This observer is completely and utterly immortal. He will never age and he will never die. You might wonder why this observer doesn't simply try to solve the puzzle himself. Surely over the course of an infinite life he would fare better than the sad little mortals who devote themselves to this labor. Unfortunately, the observer does not have the capacity to attempt such a feat. He is capable of only 2 things. He can watch and he can listen. He watches the players work at the puzzle, noting what works and what does not, what courses of action bring forth the optimal results. Over countless iterations, he becomes wiser, more experienced, and he passes that experience over to the players he watches. In a way, it is as if they become wiser, just as he does. And as the players try to solve the puzzle, there's little for them to do but talk. Talk of their lives, their skills, their own memories and experiences. The observer is a supreme listener. He remembers every last scrap of that information without fail, and he passes that on as well. Perhaps the puzzle reaches a stage where knowledge of plumbing is required. While the first player was a plumber, and so the observer can communicate the required expertise to the 216th. Although many players have tried to solve the puzzle, it is almost as if they have apparently become one person, a cascading gestalt consciousness tied together by their common observer. How long would it take this dual being to solve the puzzle? Now there is only one thing left for you to imagine. Imagine that this observer has a name. Imagine that thing is called the Prince. Yep. Good evening to you, Jamie Pierrot said pleasantly. I'd like to challenge you to a duel. The Prince began its analysis instantly. taking in every facet of the short, round little man before him. It whispered to him how people of that size usually fought, what skills he was likely to have developed in his own occupation, the state of his health, judging from the pallor of his skin, his likely first move, based on the tension of his muscles, his most common emotions based on the shape of his face, his planet of origin based on the accent with which he'd spoken. I'm curious, we know what the prince is conceptually, but how did it come to be now, is what I'm curious about. I wonder, is it like a soul? Is it a gene tyrant bullshit? Is it some aether artifact? Who knows? 1,000 dead eyes, all belonging to the prince, scrutinized the man, dragging out every scrap of information it could. And then it told Pierrot, based on that information, how best to kill him. It so often came down to that in the end. The little man scoffed, pulling his hands out of his pockets, and the prince instantly identified the knuckle dusters he now held. The experiences of one of the previous holders, an aether smith, told Pierrot that those weapons were most likely aether armaments. The inherited memories told him that the small indentations on the outside of the dusters were telltale signs that they were intended for range attack. Oh my gosh. Wait, is this like whoever kills the guy with the prince gets to have the prince?
Well, maybe we'll find out. Eat this. Holds out her.
I have no reason to accept that request, the small man snapped. Liar, Pierrot could see, even without the prince pointing it out, that the Supremacy Commander was itching for a fight. The bloodlust was visible in every wrinkle of his face. Sorry. Still, his common sense was winning against that bloodlust. The prince's advice came through loud and clear. Death likely within the next 60 seconds in current situation. Highest chance of success lies in deployment of pre-ranged gambit. Execute now. You have every reason to accept my request, Pierrot smiled, placing a hand over his heart. You see, there's a bomb inside my chest. The angle of the rifles pointing at him grew more urgent, but Pierrot wasn't especially concerned. Only 19 of the 50 or so soldiers in the room had dispositions that would lead them to shoot without direct orders, and Pierrot was fairly confident in his ability to evade those 19. The Aether program called the Prince excelled at calculating shot trajectories. After all, it would lead him to the spot with the greatest chance of survival. The little man snorted. You're lying! I'm not. Pierrot shook his head, pulling the sleeve back on one of his arms to show off the bracelets there. These Aether armaments are known as the Revolutions. They allow me to phase parts of my body through matter at will. Using them, I was able to take a heavy-duty mining charge and place it within my own body. It will detonate when I speak a certain code word, causing heavy damage to the ship, and, of course, killing all of us. The commander's brow furrowed, clearly trying to work out whether Pierrot was bluffing. He was not, needless to say. The prince had decided that risking his own life was vital for the success of the mission, and Pierrot had learned long ago that the prince was never wrong. A duel, the commander muttered. Under what terms? You versus me. All weapons and techniques permitted, save for detonating the bomb inside my chest. The duel ends when one of us is dead. The commander shifted his stance slightly, raising his arms up like a boxer. The gathered soldiers took a few steps back, creating a space for the duel to take place, their rifles still pointed inwards. Pierrot took a step forward. He had no intention of finishing the duel in this hangar, but he still had to make a good show of it. Your answer? Very well, the commander sniffed. Are you ready to die, degenerate? Almost. And, moving in a blur, Pierrot tore away his captain's coat and tossed it aside, leaving only the white vest beneath. Age had done nothing to dent his muscular physique, and without the bulky coat, the holster for his plasma pistol was clearly visible. I think you might want to put a comma after coat. He wouldn't need to use it.
Fucking Yakuza ripping off his fucking coat.
Much more, he's got a fucking dragon tattoo on his back. Much more free, even if your ships are dreadfully cold. Family boss Pierrot.
He goes onto his face. UAP, ship Captain, Jamie Perot.
Yeah! He gets in the fighting stance, he's like, it's time to scrap. Much more freeing, even if your ships are dreadfully cold. One last thing before we begin. What is your name? The commander narrowed his eyes, still clearly watching for a trap. What's it to you? You may be the last person I exchange words with. It would bring me some comfort to know who my killer might be. A chuckle. Fair enough. I gave up my name many years ago. You may call me the instructor. Oh, fucking this guy. A pleasure, Pierrot said, Gerol. And with that, shall we begin? Yes, the instructor grinned. I think we shall. For a moment, the two of them were still, facing each other in the clearing of the crowd. A frozen moment of utmost tension and patient death. Then they both moved at once, Pierrot reaching for his pistol and the instructor shooting forward like a cannonball, fists ready to execute a devastating assault. The duel began. 40 years earlier. Are you satisfied? The young soldier named Pierrot spat down his defeated opponent.
He's not that young.
Are you satisfied? The young soldier named Pierrot
spat showed him protagonist. Like, I like it.
Satisfied with all this? They were standing in what had once been Caput Leon's command bridge, but had become, over the course of half an hour of furious battle, a wasteland of broken steel and glass. The Caput himself lay sprawled out against a remaining pillar, blood staining the outside of his mouth. The blonde-haired bandit smirked up at his vanquisher. Satisfied? Leon mused, his voice like broken glass. Yeah, I suppose I might be. Everything is as it should be. Pierrot narrowed his eyes, his body shaking with fury. Everything as it should be? The curly-haired young man hissed. He waved a hand at the view outside the colossal windows. Then what the hell is this? The battle outside had lasted many hours, and Pierrot couldn't even begin to guess how many on both sides had been lost. The Unite Prosper floated, burning through space, and what was left of the Unite Hope buffeted like hail against the hull of Caput Leon's command ship. Leon's forces hadn't fared much better. The pirate fleet had been shattered like matchsticks, chunks of hull and balls of fuel and floating puddles of human being their last flight of indignity.
Beginning.
Perhaps they'd stay... What?
That's beginning, not being.
Beginning their last flight of indignity, my bad. Perhaps they'd stay floating here forever. The most feared pirate fleet in UAP space, and they destroyed it in an afternoon. It hadn't been worth it. The fireworks outside had been paid for with blood. Leon simply looked out at the devastation, chuckling to himself. Despite his accomplishments, he didn't strike an imposing figure. With his scruffy hair and rough shave, he looked more like a homeless man who'd wandered onto the bridge than anything else. You think this is funny? Pierrot hissed. Nah, Leon shook his head, still smirking. Not funny. Necessary. A lot of people had to die to get us in this situation. The ends justify the means. Pierrot could take no more. With a roar of righteous anger, he slammed his leg into Leon's torso with a devastating kick, sending the pirate flying into the wall. The bastard just kept laughing. The ends do not justify the means! Pierrot snarled, reaching out and grabbing the villain by the collar, doing his best to resist the urge to strangle him. How many people have you stolen from? How many have you hurt? How many have you killed? What end could justify all that? Leon sighed, his face inches from Pierrot's. Would you believe me, he asked, if I said it was peace and joy for all mankind? Oh yeah, because didn't Pierrot say the ends justify the means too in an earlier?
Oh.
And he also said peace and joy for all mankind multiple times. I see, so that's the puzzle that the prince is trying to solve. He wants peace and joy for all mankind. But how, Prince? How?
The Keikaku.
You know, maybe I'm just seeing too much Berserk where I want to, but the prince almost is giving me like an egg of the perfect world vibe. It's like, I'm gonna create this world through blood and sacrifice, and I don't care what it takes. This is my sole purpose. Pierrot didn't make a noise. This is present time now, right? Yeah. Pierrot didn't make a noise as his face was slammed into the wall. This pain was necessary for victory, but the loss of his dignity was not. Instead, he whirled back around, smashed his elbow into his opponent's stomach, and jumped backwards to avoid the cords that shot out at him in retaliation. Those knuckle dusters were interesting weapons. Their form caused those who saw them to assume they were specialized in close-range confrontations, but in truth they were designed for long-range combat. The instructor punched at empty air again, and glowing white cords shot out from the knuckles, latching onto Pierrot's arm and pulling him closer for another assault. The white cords looked diminutive, but Pierrot had no doubt that against a lesser fighter they would have ripped the limb straight off. Pierrot let the cords pull him in close, then shifted his body into a dropkick midair, smashing his feet into the instructor's round stomach. The instructor slid backwards across the floor, detaching the cords with a trigger on the side of his knuckle duster. He needed a moment to recover, clearly, and didn't want to be dragging Pierrot along with him. That was fine. Defeating the instructor was only the secondary objective in this situation. The first was reaching the desired destination. They were no longer in the hangar when the fight had begun. As they'd fought, they'd gradually moved, passing through hallways and function rooms as their battle grew fiercer and fiercer. Pierrot had been careful to make this travel seem incidental, the result of them driving each other back with the sheer power of their attacks. But in truth, this had been his objective for the beginning. Pierrot closed the distance, smashing a fist into the instructor's face that could have shattered bone, but he was pulling his punches. He couldn't allow this fight to end before they reached the engine room, after all. They'd begun their assault on the Regent by destroying the engine. It seemed only fair that an eye be exchanged for an eye. Well, that's some supremacy thinking there, buddy. It wanted to meet you, Leon coughed, still half laughing through broken ribs. To see you! Wait, does this imply the prince has some kind of omnipotence that he would know about this guy?
Well, not necessarily omnipotence, it's got a lot of info. Mm-hmm. It can disappear that way, because you are not super smart, prince.
Pierrot faltered, looking down at the defeated man slumped against the wall. Despite everything, all the atrocities that the Caput committed, Pierrot couldn't see any trace of deception or malevolence in him right now. Every word seemed genuine. Still, he didn't move his gun away from Leon's head. Who wanted to meet me? Piero asked quietly, sweat sliding down his brow. What are you talking about? Nothing about the situation made sense. This was meant to be the end of Kaput Leon's reign of terror, his fleet vanquished, his allies abandoning him, his command ship annihilated. And yet the criminal seemed just as controlled as... I assume just as in control as he'd always been. More even, as though a great weight had been released from his shoulders. It wanted to see you, Leon repeated, rhythmically tapping a finger against his temple. The prince. Piero took a step closer, gun still trained on his adversary. A prince? What prince? You had royal support? Leon laughed uproariously, as if the whole thing we are one big joke. What if I told you, he said, wiping an amused tear from his eye with a shaking hand, that I had a constant companion, a voice in my head that knows exactly what to do to reach a happy ending? I don't believe you! As if Piero hadn't even spoken, Leon went on. An aether program inside my head, he muttered dreamily, passed on and on and on for hundreds of years. Peace and joy for all mankind, you understand? That's the end goal. Everything I've done, everything was necessary for that purpose. The world isn't any more peaceful because of you, Piero scoffed, and people certainly aren't happier. Not yet, Leon did his best to shrug. But eventually. It's the long game, my friend. One day, because of what I've done here, it'll all be worth it. How? Leon looked towards him, and Piero saw the glint of zealotry in his eyes, a madness born of singular purpose. I told you, didn't I? He breathed. The prince wanted to see what you were capable of, to see if you were worthy. You are! He paused for a second, grin faltering on his face. It wants me to die now. Piero bit his lip. Kaput Leon certainly seemed to have lost his mind, but Piero had seen strange things born of Aetheral over the years. The kind of Aether program Leon was describing wasn't necessarily impossible. Passed from person to person with specific goals and pre-programmed by its original creator. Still, though. You said it wants you to die, Piero called out, moving no closer. What do you mean by that? Shakily, with all the effort left in his body, Leon reached out with a grasping hand, reaching out for empty air. I'll show you. He giggled. Just take my hand. Oh, so it's like passed on through the handshake. Fucking Hamon baton pass.
Take my Hamon. Piero.
Take my Aether programming. It'll serve you well. Oh, do you think Piero's gonna pass this shit on the Dragon? No, probably not. They're like in different areas. Maybe he'll pass it on the Daphne. Oh, I've got all kinds of theories now. I'm gonna pass it off to you because my throat's really phlegmy. I'm really sorry.
Give me the prince.
Mm-hmm.
Piero endured the barrage of punches, each powerful enough to smash through steel. He'd been thrown flat up against the main power unit, and the instructor wasn't allowing him a moment to recover or counter from this assault. Destination reached. Objective accomplished. Defeat enemy and exit ship. Easier said than done. When it came to situations like a fast-paced fight, the prince wasn't in its element. He provided intelligence and guidance based on prior observations, of course, but its true worth lay in long-term planning. With that, it'd taken Piero from small-time leader of a pirate-challenging vessel to the king of Unite Fleet itself. He'd already done what he needed to at any rate. The only thing left to do was win. Piero's hands lashed out, faster than lightning, and seized the instructor's fist mid-punch. The application of pressure shattered the knuckle dusters that had been such annoyances with a satisfying crunch. For a moment, the instructor simply stared at Piero in surprise, his mouth a perfect circle. Then he lunged forward with his legs, dual kicks rushing forward to smash Piero's chest in.
Oh, I'm just imagining the scene like slow-mo. He's pushing off the ground and doing the drop kick while Piero's grabbing his arms.
It's like fucking invincible. They wouldn't meet the mark. Piero was finished with these games. He span around, smashing the instructor's face against the power unit, then whirled him around in his grip, securing him in a tight headlock with one muscular arm, even.
My friend, it spun around.
Thank you. The instructor's legs kicked at empty air, trying to break through until he realised it was a pointless effort. His grey aether was nearly spent after all. I give, he wheezed, eyes bulging. The ship is yours!
Nice.
Piero ignored him. This man had caused him a great deal of trouble after all. The soldiers that had watched them throughout the duel looked to each other, doubtless wondering if they should intervene, but no shots came. That was not the way of the supremacy after all. Piero met the eyes of the young soldier at the head
How
of
the fuck are these guys a superpower? They're like the easiest to manipulate country of all time.
It depends who you get. This is...
No one has any survival instinct. All 50 dudes are just like, we're too honorable.
This is like Musashi honor times 10. This is an easy one to get. They wouldn't be here if they were smart.
Yeah, that's true.
Piero met the eyes of the young soldier at the head of the squad and stirred, unblinking. Piero squeezed. Piero squeezed. Piero squeezed. Crack. The corpse of the instructor fell, an undignified heap on the floor of the engine room. Piero simply sighed in relief, adjusted the bangles on his wrists, and began marching back towards the hangar. The majority of the soldiers moved out of his way, whether it was from fear or respect was irrelevant. But the young soldier Piero had locked eyes with called out after him. "Sir, he said the ship is yours." "I have a ship," Piero said, voice dull, staring straight ahead as he marched. "I don't need this one. I have only one demand." "Of course," the young soldier cried, hurrying to match his pace.
Oh my god.
"Begin flying the ship back in the direction of the supremacy border," Piero said. "As winner, it's my right to demand that, isn't it?" "Of course," the soldier nodded vigorously. "You have won the day. The codes of the First Supreme accept you as a superior." He'd gotten himself a true believer. How fortunate. So yeah, if this was like, if the guy wasn't like the equivalent of like, I don't know what the equivalent of this would be in real life. There's no equivalent.
There's no. This is just Wamu on crack.
Yeah. This is like the super hardline supremacy guys. Also,
Yeah, zealots, maybe.
Yeah. Pierre went on, entering the hangar. "I'll need a gas mask. My ship is flooded with gas, isn't it?"
No, he's not the one that planned this. Was his goal to enter the supremacy the whole time?
What? The young soldier furrowed his brow.
Well, he knows...
The young soldier furrowed his brow. "How did you... A gas mask, boy." Of course, of course." The young soldier turned to
Wait,
his...
is this implying that he knew about the gas because he's smart and has the prince, or is it because he planned this so he could become the leader of this crew and go to the supremacy?
It's the former.
Okay, never mind.
"You've won this day, sir, but one must remain supreme through continual triumph. Perhaps one day we'll meet again, and again we'll determine who is superior among us." As the staff hurried to deliver Pierre's request, he ignored the young man's rhetoric. It was meaningless, after all. Nothing he said would have any impact on the future at all. The second he'd met Jamie Perrault, that young man had ceased being a living person. Now he was but a prologue to the dead.
Oh, that's so metal. Prologue to the dead.
Pierre didn't know why exactly he took Leon's hand. Perhaps it was curiosity or naivety or some momentary madness, but take the hand he did. And a second later, the two of them were surrounded by a storm of bright blue aether. He instantly tried to pull away to break free of Leon's grasp, but the effort was fruitless. It was as if the two of them, for these few moments, had been locked together at a molecular level. He could no more separate himself from Leon than he could separate the two halves of his brain. And through it all, Leon laughed, a mad sound of cruelty and horror and a kind of breathless relief.
How similar is this aether in color to Dragon's aether?
It's different bright blue. It's just a common colour.
Okay, never mind.
For this sort of stuff.
Okay. I was starting to craft a crazy conspiracy theory where Dragon went back in time and started the program.
Fucking Josuke.
Yeah!
Piero, I'm gonna push the car. The words slipped from Piero's lips once again, strained against the force surrounding them. "What's so funny?" It wasn't clear whether Leon was answering Piero or just rambling, but he spoke all the same. "I've had the prince for 3 years now," he whispered, "and the prince has had me. It's funny, isn't it? I don't know where it ends and I begin. I don't even know if I'm me anymore." His eyes flicked up to stare at Piero, narrowing maliciously. He showed off his teeth with a grotesque, face-splitting grin. "Well, you'll see," he whispered. And then, in a single transcendental moment of horror, Caput Leon was undone. As strands of blue aether poured out of his body and into Piero's, that same body began to fall apart. Leon's skin crumbled into dust, his eyes melted into rivers of clear liquid, teeth poured out from his mouth as smoke. Before Piero could even blink, he found he was holding onto the hand of a bleached white skeleton. And then, a second later, that too evaporated into a fine white mist. Piero stumbled back, staring at his own hand, terrified that he too would begin to decompose. But nothing happened. Even as ships burned outside and what was left of Caput Leon was expunged by the venting systems, Piero was unharmed. He opened his mouth to laugh in relief, and then his mind opened instead. Can I pop on his back to you for the last little bit?
Yeah, sure. I can't believe Leon got, what's the word I'm looking for? Ejected from the ship. Was he the imposter?
Yeah, Prince comes with automatic destruction of evidence.
That's actually kind of based. I was assuming that he was going to turn into Aether and add, like, his life to all the lives in there.
Yeah, so it records it. It's not like you, actually. It's just, like, info.
Damn. The Prince is kind of metal as fuck as a concept. Piero adjusted the gas mask as the cutter pod reached the midpoint of its journey back to the region. The equipment was uncomfortable, but serviceable. If nothing else, it would allow him to get to the Widow's ship without breathing the gas in. He glanced up, looking through the cutter pod's window at the Supremacy assault ship growing smaller in his vision as it began its own return journey. He wondered vaguely if it had a name, but then again it didn't really matter at this point. Staring straight at the horseshoe vessel, Piero whispered under his breath, "Finn." The explosion was instantaneous. The entire back half of the vessel, where the power unit was, consumed in an instant of flame and light. Chunks of debris went flying in every direction, and they would keep flying until the day they finally hit something. There was no possibility of the ship recovering, or of there being any survivors. A heavy-duty ship like the Regent could limp along for a brief time after suffering such heavy damage, but this assault ship was made for hit and run, and it has certainly been hit. It had been a simple matter to destroy the vessel. Piero would simply use the Revolution's phasing capabilities to pull the mining charge out of his own body and place it inside the power unit while the instructor was pummeling him. That had been his objective from the very beginning. As the ship had begun moving back towards Supremacy space before its destruction, its corpse would continue in that direction for the foreseeable future. If the wreckage was discovered at that point, there'd be no sign that the UAP was involved. That was ideal. It wasn't yet time for the war to begin after all. Piero leaned back and relaxed as the cutter pod zoomed back towards the region. "Marco, report," Piero said as he marched towards the hangar where the Widow's ship was waiting. He knew Marco was compromised, but at this point that didn't really matter anymore. 10 seconds delay. Then, "Reporting." Sorry. "Status of escape pods?" Oh wait, this is the robot,
Yeah.
not a guy.
Reporting.
Inoperable. Sorry, I got fucking confused. I forgot who Marco was. "Status of crew?" "Majority dead or dying. Those who are not currently dead or dying will likely become dead or dying within the next hour." Piero tightened his fist. "I see." There was nothing else for it then. The Prince confirmed it was time to abandon ship. No more effort on Piero's part would influence the situation. The time for action had come to an end. The thing is, even if he achieves peace for all mankind through this war, what's to say that peace won't be interrupted? Piero entered the decontamination chamber just before the Widow's hangar, sighing and rubbing the bridge of his nose. It had been a long day. "Wait!" cried a voice from behind him just before the doors closed. Someone charged into the decontamination chamber just before the cleaning sequence began. You type it, I can't see the word. Piero's hand flew to his unholstered pistol, only to relax when he saw who it was. A young male underman, hands on his knees as he panted to breathe. It was easy to see why. He clearly hadn't been fortunate enough to find a usable rebreather, and instead had made his countermeasure against the gas. A bundle of reddened bandages were pressed against his mouth, and Piero could see that same scarlet in his bloodshot eyes. Piero put a hand on his shoulder reassuringly, allowing the underman to catch his breath. "Hold up there, underman. You're safe now. Your name?" "Werner, sir," the boy wheezed. Daniel Werner." Wait, did Werner died, right?
No, that was Lucia that died.
Okay, I was just making sure this wasn't, like, North replacing him. So Danny, like, ran away?
Yeah, Bruno mentioned that he just ran for it when the shooting started.
Got it. Piero patted Werner on the back, the slightest smile on his lips. At least this one person had survived. If nothing else, he had that. "You did well to make it here, Werner. We're getting out of here. How are you feeling?" The decontamination sequence began, a fine wet mist filling the room as they spoke. "I've been better," Werner coughed. I'm glad you're all right, sir." "The concern is appreciated, Underman, but you seem to be in more need of help than me. We're about to board a ship. Doubtless they have some panacea aboard for your lungs." Werner nodded, relief spreading over the visible portion of his face. "Then we can tell Command what happened here. What the Supremacy did to us. We can make 'em pay." Piero sucked in air through his nose. So they'd hit this little snag. "I'm afraid not, boy," he said quietly. "Sir?" "If word of this gets out," Piero explained, "the governing council won't be able to ignore this kind of aggression. It'll mean war, a war we can't win yet. It's not yet time for us to take on the Supremacy." "But," Werner took a step back, "but sir, think about what they've done. The crew, my friends, they died choking and shot, and they did it like it was nothing. You want me to pretend nothing happened? People are gonna ask, they're gonna want to know." Piero's voice was dull. "There was a failure in the shielding of the main power unit. An explosion occurred as a result, and the coolant leaked into the ship's air supply. What happened here was simply a tragic mistake." Werner looked down at the ground, fists balled at his side. That's a lie, yes, but a lie that will save millions of lives. But it's wrong! Werner snapped his head back up to look at Pierrot. We can't just let them get away with this. We can't just pretend nothing happened. They'll keep doing it until we stop them. Someday, Pierrot sighed, but not today. I'm sorry. Werner didn't break his gaze this time. He just stared right into Pierrot's eyes. Do you remember Ulos? He asked, voice shaking. Of course. He'd lost many men that day, too. On that occasion, it had felt worth it. They had saved so many in exchange, but this time... Nobody else wanted to fly in there. Nobody else wanted to save us. But you flew in there, and you did what you had to do because it was the right thing to do. And the right thing to do here is tell the truth. It's the only way the dead can rest easy. The passion in the young man's voice was obvious. For a moment, Pierrot was reminded of that foolhardy boy of a soldier who'd fought against Caput Leon at the end of an age, but he cast such thoughts away just as quickly. He ran a hand over his tired face. I can't convince you, can I? He muttered. Werner shook his head. I'm sorry, sir. That's quite all right. Pierrot took his gun from his holster and shot Werner in the chest. It was a kill shot. Werner stumbled backwards, staring wide-eyed at the smoking wound just above his stomach, one hand half reaching out to the hole as if there was anything he could do to close it. Then he looked up at Pierrot as he slumped against the wall, slid down it to lie on the floor. He blinked. He didn't do anything else after that. The decontamination sequence finished, and the doors to the hangar opened. Pierrot remained for only a moment longer, closing the eyes of the underman as a show of respect, before turning and striding towards the widow's waiting ship. He couldn't afford to delay. He couldn't afford to compromise or let virtue twist his path. He couldn't afford to follow any route except the one to certain victory. After all, the ends justified the means. Peace and joy for all mankind. So he's got that whole utilitarian thing going on, like to the extreme. Man. Dragon was right about him. Who knows? Peace and joy. I'm curious what will happen to this prince. Because here's the thing, no matter what happens with the prince, it's kind of fucked if you think about it, yeah? If the prince succeeds, sure, it might accomplish peace, temporary or otherwise, but so many people died for it, all because the ends justified the means. And if the prince were to get removed or destroyed some way, then all those lives that had accumulated basically added up to nothing, and all of it was meaningless. So it's really like a lose-lose situation, unless you're a pure utilitarian. Then I guess it's a win if the prince gets his way.
Yeah.
Kind of sucks.
Can
you imagine the pressure, too? It's like, what, you're not going to go for peace and joy of all mankind? You know, like 3,000 guys died doing this, yeah? You'd be a real dick if you didn't do it, Pierrot.
Exactly. Well, it's not that sentient, but it sort of slots
right
into your personality a bit.
Yeah. Downloaded. Dragon could overcome it, though, with his brain and the Archivist. The Archivist would remind him of his true self.
That's all. You would never
Dragon,
want peace
you don't
and
care
joy
about
for
helping
mankind.
people? You've never cared about peace and joy for all mankind. In fact, I'm pretty sure you wish most people weren't around.
That's
Remember
right.
that, Dragon. You're an asshole.
I would never say that.
Yeah, tosses away the prince, kills thousands of lives worth of work. I didn't need this anyway. Come on, Skipper, let's go rob a bank.
I was really happy with how this chapter came out when I wrote it, because it feels like
Yeah, it was really good. This would be the chapter that wins the web serial Emmys.
Piero going for the Oscar.
Yeah. That it was so tragic, too, because Danny, like, you know, had been like, you don't understand him like I do, Dragon, fuck you! And that's why he ran, right? And then, he gets shot by his hero. That's so fucked.
Oh.
And also the perspectives there, too. Danny's like, you saved us because no one else would come. And he was like, I only did it because I saved more lives than lives were lost. So it's not really about you.
Oh.
Man. This was a certified Tanhony moment. Alright.
Tanhony, I love discovering SCP. I'm sorry, little one.
Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time on Aetheral Space. Bye!